Hey everybody, it's Michelle with Transform Through Therapy, and we are doing another installment in our COVID-19 series for the Daily Herald. And I'm very excited personally about the guest that we have today. It's a charity, and as you know, we don't support very many charities that we put our full support behind. I have Whitney Logan here today. She's a licensed professional counselor. She's also the clinical director for the Battle Within, which I don't think very many of you have heard about, but it is an organization that specializes. They're a frontline therapy network, and they're a frontline network for first responders, for veterans, for police officers, for that kind of thing. So right now is a hectic and busy time for them. So we wanted to bring awareness to what they're doing. Thanks for being here, Whitney.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yay! So I wanted to talk with Whitney today and focus on the unique situation that first responders and veterans are having during COVID and get her insight and input into that.
Yeah, so the Battle Within in its original inception was an organization that served veterans and first responders predominantly in a 5-day in-person sort of like a mental health program. So people would come from, we're based in Kansas City, and people would come from Kansas City and then also all over the country and spend 5 days in a cohort that moved through a certain type of curriculum that we designed specifically to help folks recovering from trauma experiences that they have received either in combat or on the front line as a first responder. We've worked with about 15 to 20% of the Kansas City Police Department.
Wow.
And many, many veterans from all over the country. When the coronavirus really broke out in the US and everything came to a screeching halt, we had to cancel these cohorts, these groups that a lot of veterans and first responders had been waiting for a long time. And so when that happened, we realized that we needed to create some kind of resources for those folks who not only were going to have to wait longer for this program, but also were now maybe in increased isolation with their symptoms still raging. And at that time, some of the veterans that are on our executive team said to all of us that they could see really clearly how healthcare workers and medical personnel were a newly deployed part of the front line. And so they decided they wanted to extend these services to healthcare professionals as well. And so we created pretty quickly a referral network of therapists, people that we have personally vetted and screened that are qualified to work with traumatized populations, with first responder, veteran, and healthcare populations. And these therapists agree to see folks at a reduced fee, and our organization pays the therapist that reduced fee so that the therapy services themselves are totally free to our frontline first responder folks. And they can apply for our services. We match them with a therapist that we think is uniquely qualified to help. And then they receive 6 to 10 sessions for free and sometimes more if needed.
It's really wonderful, and we're proud and excited to be part of that. And we're going to put information in links below so that if you guys want to participate with either time volunteering or with money or anything like that to help with this. We've had a lot of people come to us and ask how they can help first responders with their mental wellness during this period of time. And you guys are one of the only organizations that are actively doing something.
Yeah, and so far, a lot of the people we're working with are in the Kansas City area, but we are now working in 11 states. So we have recruited professionals in every state to help us serve these folks every time we get a new applicant from out of state, and are really proud to say we haven't turned anyone away yet.
That's really wonderful. So for what I wanted to ask Whitney was a couple of questions about patterns that they're seeing with COVID. It has changed the day-to-day for a lot of veterans and people that already have trauma in their past. So I'd love to just ask you, Whitney, what are some of those things that you're seeing that are increased symptomology, or just things that people should be aware of with first responders and veterans during this time?
Well, I'm sure that anybody watching this or listening to this right now can relate to how this time probably augments or compounds whatever psychological stresses you already may have. It's hard to be alone without your routine, without the community support you may have come to rely on, without all the little things and the big things that gave you some meaning or sometimes distractions or connection. And so when those things get pulled away, typically what happens is that, maybe even if you aren't in some active line of duty, be that in a hospital or in a local police department or fire department or an EMT, or a veteran, you are still probably aware of how impacted you've been by this pandemic. And so we have some veterans and some first responders who may be retired or not in active duty, but they're in isolation like the rest of us. And a lot of those folks have traumatic histories in their job or in their time in service. And sometimes they've done a good job of kind of staying just a step in front of those trauma histories. And now everything's come to a screeching halt, and a lot of those feelings and memories and carefully compartmentalized psychological symptoms are really up in the foreground, and there's nowhere to go to get away from them. So that's one of the things we're seeing a lot of. And then we have kind of two co-occurring crises right now. One is COVID-19 and one is all of the civic unrest due to race relations in communities, sometimes between the police and the community. And so this is complicated stuff for folks on the front line, both in hospitals and in the field of public service. And so they may be experiencing all those things I mentioned before that all of us have some familiarity with right now. And then an added layer of that is that their work life is incredibly stressful and very isolating as well. We've talked to a lot of police officers who feel misunderstood or scared or afraid for their lives. They're being threatened, or their families are being threatened. So the moral injuries there, if you happen to be one of the officers who really got into this to protect and serve, is pretty profound. And then there's also the difficulty of maybe having to look at the relationship your police department has had with the community and maybe see how it hasn't been good, or how there are things to own or name or work on or improve, or that there's the potential to really feel a lot of shame. And then as far as people in hospital settings, it's not just the critical care ICUs that are overwhelming. There's a lot of hospitals where their census is low, and so people have been furloughed, or they've had to close clinics or call people and cancel surgeries. And sometimes these surgeries are surgeries people have been looking forward to for a long time, like a hip replacement or a knee replacement. And it's another place where there's more moral injury. You get into that work to be helpful, and when your job suddenly becomes one where you can't be helpful, it's pretty painful.
So for those of you that are watching this, this is a really important conversation. Everybody's going to have different viewpoints of all of these things. One thing I just want to keep clear, because Whitney and I are clinicians, and so we're talking about this on a clinical level. It's really important to understand that a lot of people do the type of work they do for moral reasons. They want to make a moral difference in their community, in their families, in their lives. Whether or not they end up making the moral difference they want to do that. So when they're faced with a situation that they're up against, realizing that they haven't been able to make the impact they want, they're incapable of making the impact they want, they might even be part of the problem, that creates a lot of trauma that they need to work through and they need to understand. And that is not a bad thing for people to be looking inside of themselves to make changes and make corrections and make a difference. But it's difficult, and it's very difficult to traverse alone.
Yeah, I would say it's almost impossible to do alone. You know, you need a therapeutic space to unpack all of that safely.
Yes. And so all of these are just issues that arise from what's happening in the circumstances that we find ourselves in right now. And as people in the community, the last thing I wanted to ask Whitney is, what can we do as individuals to help people that are going through all of these very trying and difficult situations, people we care about, people that have put their lives on the line to protect our country, protect our communities? What can we do to help them during these times?
Well, if you know someone who's on the front line in some capacity, and I would include veterans, because their service extends beyond their actual active duty. If you know someone on the front line, checking on them is really important. Reaching out, seeing how they're doing, seeing if you can do something for them, being willing to listen. Listening is really critical. It's important not to try to explain to somebody else how they might be feeling, you know?
Yes.
So listening and trying to listen without judgment. As you said so well, you know, as a clinician, one of the things that we hope to do for people is to help them actually look at themselves in a non-judgmental way. That is the birthplace of compassion, and therefore the birthplace of potential change if change needs to happen.
And when you were talking to me earlier about something that I really want everybody to know about before we close out, and that is the psychology and the mental place that a lot of these kind of workers are coming from, which is a group mentality.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And I would love for you to explain that.
Yeah. Well, this is actually kind of related to what you just asked me. You may find yourself checking in with a veteran or a first responder or a healthcare worker that you know and asking them how they're doing, and they might say to you, "I'm fine, I'm okay." And that may be true. And it also may be a somewhat rehearsed, practiced response, or a belief connected to their own identity, because the work on all of those critical first responder roles is teamwork. And it's very important for people to feel like a stable, reliable, good, fine part of the team when the situations are so life and death.
I think that's really important to understand. And as we wrap up here, I want to just reinforce with people that what we care about is change. We want positive, moral change for our communities, and we want people to be safe. And in order for change to happen, they have to be able to safely look at themselves and look at the situations they're in and process through that in a mentally safe way. So whatever we can do to provide that for people and allow that for people, it will only help us as communities, and it'll help us traverse these things that matter so much in an effective.
Yeah. At the Battle Within, we talk a lot about being part of the solution. And so when we talk about something like civic unrest or community unrest, it's our belief that getting mental health resources to folks helps them become more mature. And then they're able to operate inside of their chosen profession in a more mature way. And they also can be part of a solution. So yeah, thanks for highlighting this work. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate everything you guys are doing. We'll have lots of information down below so you can learn more about the Battle Within, and you can learn more about helping first responders, veterans, police officers in your community to feel mentally safe and to move those objectives forward. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us, Whitney. We're very grateful.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Leave your questions down below, your comments, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.